Then, good afternoon. We're starting the launching webinar of the 2020 BioTrade Principles and Criteria. Welcome to everyone. This is more than a milestone, it's a landmark. We don't do this all the time. This happens each 20, 15 years. So we're launching again a series of BioTrade principles, which basically help us to ensure sustainable use of biodiversity and sustainable trade in biodiversity-based products. This event is going to gather the leaders of several agencies, but also key stakeholders involved in the application of BioTrade principles over the last 20 years. And before we start the substance, we're going to have some housekeeping, where one of our colleagues, Ivana, is going to show how we use the WebEx platform for interaction. Ivana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David, for giving me the word. Excellencies, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, this is Ivana Padierno from UNCTAD talking to you. For this webinar, please make sure you are muted during all the event, and kindly use the chat to send any questions or comments. Also, for your information, note that all presentations and background materials related to this webinar will be available in the UNCTAD ITC BioTrade knowledge sharing platform and self-assessment tool, as well as in the webinar website. This webinar is being recorded and will be also shared with the general public afterwards. We also invite you to follow us on social media for more information on this launch event and on the upcoming activities of the 2020 Principles and Criteria dissemination campaign. Next slide. Before we start this exciting launch webinar, I would like to share some technical instructions with you for all of us to feel comfortable using WebEx platform today. Here's a brief training on the main features we may need. As you see in the image on the screen, icon number 1 is your microphone. We kindly ask you to please keep your microphones muted to avoid any background noise. You will see that this will be often muted by default, and only speakers must unmute their microphones to present or answer any questions during the Q&A section. Thank you. Icon number 2 is the chat. If you want to, please test this right now, so we'll make sure we know how to use it. For those of you who are joining us now, or you haven't done it yet, kindly reply to the introductory question that we posted in the chat. The chat must be used to send questions to the speakers, general comments, or ask for any clarifications during the presentation. Please note that the questions will be answered directly via chat or addressed during the Q&A section after the presentations and before the closing. You may also find in the chat some links, publications, and other relevant information that is related to issues mentioned today. You also will see that you can send your messages in the chat. You can send it to everyone or privately. And we are asking you, for a better reference, send the questions to everyone. And if needed, please indicate to whom the question is addressed. Icon number 3 is raise hand. Please, only speakers are invited to use this button to alert the moderator in case they want to speak from the floor, and also during the Q&A section. If you press it by mistake, you can click it again and lower your hand. Icon 4 is share screen. You don't need to share your screen today, as our team will be sharing the screen to deliver our presentations today. We're only going to share screen one of our partners to do a live demo. Icon number 5 is to see the list of participants. This usually appears on the right side of the screen. You'll see the word host appearing below the name of the meeting host. Today is our colleague, Rafe Dent. So here ends this brief WebEx training. I hope everything is clear and that you are all WebEx masters now. Thank you very much for your attention. Without stealing any more time, I leave you to this promising launch event. Thank you.
Thank you. As we all know, the BioTrade Principles and Criteria are guidance for the sourcing, production, and commercialization of biodiversity-based products. The first set of BioTrade Principles and Criteria were adopted in 2007, and now we have a reiteration, a review, a deep review, based on a certain new elements that have arisen since 2007. This event is going to be co-organized by ONTAC, the International Trade Center, Helveta Swiss Intercooperation, and the Union of Ethical Biotrade, supported by the Swiss State for Economic Affairs, SECO. This was possible, this review, due to all the inputs by the BioTrade community and BioTrade organizations directly involved in the practical application of the principles over the last 13 years. Next. Now, here I will give you a roadmap of where are we going today. First, we will have the opening remarks by the principals representative of ONTAC, SECO, CITES, and the CBD. I will give an introduction on that. So a welcoming remarks, opening remarks segment of political nature. Then we will have a segment of the interactive dialogue with BioTrade partners and practitioners based on each of the 7 principles. And they will provide comments on their experience of the application of the 2007 version and how the 2020 version will look different. Also, we will have a segment, and this is a novelty, where we will be presenting the ONTAC ITC BioTrade self-assessment tool. So the verification doesn't have to be always done by third parties, but can be undertaken directly by actors. So this should speed up the implementation and application of BioTrade principles widely. After that, we'll have a question and answer segment. Please remember, as Ivana mentioned, to type your questions to the chat. We will select those questions, and the questions will be allocated to different experts and participants, depending on the nature of the question. I will be co-chairing or moderating this event with Lorena Jaramillo. The next slide, Lorena will, before Lorena does a general presentation, we'll go to the opening panel. I'm very happy about this panel, very excited. This is an all-woman leaders panel. We have our Deputy SG, Isabel Durand. We have Monica Rubiolo, Head of Trade Promotion of SECO. We have Mrs. Yvonne Higuero, Secretary General of CITES, and we'll have a video by Elizabeth Merema, Executive Director of the CBD. So we are in wonderful hands today to show us the way. Isabel Durand will be our first speaker. She has a green, blue, and transparent heart, as she has been leading the work in the House and always supporting the work on biodiversity in the terrestrial context, in the blue context, in the marine, but also on climate change, to have a clean sky. Madame Durand, the floor is yours. You're muted, Madame Durand.
I'm muted. So, thank you, David. Partner, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I'm really delighted to launch today this update principles and criteria. Because I am only with the panel. Of course, it's nice, but we need also men, of course. But especially because these principles and can really govern services derived from plant, animal, as from ecosystem services. They are anchored on the very 3 pillars of sustainability, economy, society, and environment. Upon launching BioTrade Principles and Criteria in 2007, they became the core foundation of our work on biotrade and were critical in navigating biotrade to where it is today. BioTrade benefits millions of people in over 60 countries and generated more than $5 billion in sales in 2019. An excellent example is Peru. The country set up a national commission for the promotion of biotrade in 2010. The commission has mobilized the trade, production, agriculture, forestry, environment, and business sector to support SMEs in accessing international markets and be more competitive in biotrade exports. These exports to around The impact on local communities I have personally witnessed last year when I visited the country. I was really quite impressed by what it is. And that is really a small niche, but it became really a sector in its own. Governments, companies, academia, and NGOs have applied BioTrade principles and policies and thus contribute to curbing biodiversity and generate livelihoods. This Let me give you 3 concrete examples. Produces marula oil under the BioTrade principle. Companies such as Body Shop. Their work has benefited and has uplifted the lives of rural communities. A company in Myanmar considers that adopting the sustainability principles made them resilient to the business challenges brought by the COVID-19 pandemic. Another one is the Union for Ethical BioTrade, which has built its ethical BioTrade standard on the BioTrade principle and criteria. To standard as an assurance that their small in the Eastern Caribbean region by these principles criteria in the sustainable production and trade of queen conch. So today we celebrate the culmination of 2 years of global consultations with our partners and practitioners in revising the BioTrade principles and criteria. 2020 BioTrade principles and criteria reflect the evolving legal and policy frameworks. They build on the valuable experiences, best practices, and lessons learned from BioTrade partners and practitioners. So it's really concrete and it's not only an academic approach. The innovation does not stop here because the principles and criteria are embedded in the BioTrade self-assessment tool, which we developed with ITC and are also launching today. These tools allows companies to assess where they stand in relation to sustainability standards and receive guidance on how to improve. The revision of the principles and criteria effort. Only done it alone. I want to share vision about the relevance of this work, and I want to especially recognize the steady support received from the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, SECO. Indeed, partnerships are fundamental to progress in this area of work. Partners and practitioners of BioTrade support the objectives and principles of biodiversity-related multilateral environmental agreements and play an essential part in the post-2020 global biodiversity framework that is currently negotiated. So I'm sure we all agree that sustainable trade must be part of any solution in the conservation and sustainable use of our biodiversity resources. Biodiversity is a global concern and priority. At the UN Biodiversity Summit in September, governments, leaders, companies, and also financial institutions all showed their firm commitment. But it's not enough. Urgent action is needed if we want to ensure the sustainability of the richness of biodiversity. And I'm really pleased and proud that with this 2020 BioTrade principle and criteria, we can make a contribution to this goal. So thank you for that by advance. And I will listen with pleasure my colleagues from the other partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame Durand. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is David Vivas. I will be co-moderating today. Now I'm going to give the floor to Madame Monica Rubiolo from the Swiss Secretariat, SECO. SECO has been a great supporter of BioTrade from the beginning and having entrusted us for many years to advance the concept, not only directly to UNTAC, but also other partners. Dear Monica, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, David. Thank you. And good afternoon, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. It's really a pleasure to be this afternoon with you. And thank you in particular, Isabel, Deputy Secretary General, for the kind words that you have just said. It's really, for me, very impressive to be this afternoon with you, lined up with really a very strong setting and a very strong group of partners, including the Deputy Secretary General and also Ms. Higuero, to do this political statement, as David was mentioning, which is, in our view, a very important endorsement to the work done by UNCTAD. So, distinguished partners, colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen, I would like, on behalf of the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, SECO, to congratulate UNCTAD, the BioTrade team, and its partners. Today, we are celebrating 2 milestones. This is what I have written for me, but I need now to replace that by landmark, as David was saying. Important landmarks in the world of BioTrade, launching both the 2020 BioTrade Principles and Criteria and the BioTrade Self-Assessment Tool, which UNCTAD and the International Trade Center have developed jointly. I'm really honored to be part of this important event. The story started for SECO a long time ago, 17 years ago. The BioTrade Facilitation Program was launched. And at that time, I can tell you, biodiversity was not as prominent in the international agenda as climate change and as it is today. Today, biodiversity and the loss of biodiversity is all over the news, no matter where you're looking to, whether it is a French, a Spanish, or a Swedish newspaper, you find it all over the place, reflected as one important challenge. And one proof is that the UN Biodiversity Summit, which took place only a few weeks ago, was able to gather an impressive number of heads of state and government convened under the theme of urgent action on biodiversity for sustainable development. And I would like to quote some of the words of our president, the Swiss President Simonetta Sommaruga, who highlighted at that meeting, recognized the responsibility, our responsibility, government's responsibility to ensure that production and consumption does not take place at the expense of nature and therefore of people. And I think she was really making an important point around that. We saw an impressive response from partners, pledges in the trillions numbers from the financial institutions, businesses, but also leaders from private sector from 78 countries calling for action to reverse the loss of biodiversity. So this all shows that there is a real need, but also a readiness for a concerted action by the international community to halt biodiversity loss. And it is understood that this is not only an environmental issue, but also a social and economic one. Over the past 2 decades, we have seen the potential of BioTrade to transform businesses and government policies in a manner that leads to conservation of biodiversity, sustains the livelihoods of those involved in production, the communities and the countries, and at the same time supports export diversification. And I think that we can all agree that all these are very important issues, difficult issues to tackle altogether. And it's of course clear that there is no silver magic bullet to solve all these problems, but sustainable BioTrade principles are definitely a part of the answer. The BioTrade principles and criteria are an important building block in our view on the concept of BioTrade. They provide a necessary guidance to ensure the sustainable use of resources and equitable sharing of benefits along the value chain. And I repeat myself, it doesn't mean that it's the full answer to many questions, but it's part of the answers. And of course, in the implementation of these criteria and principles, there will be discussions between partners, there will be an exchange, but it's an important orientation tool to guide this this discussion among different stakeholders. This enables developing countries to diversify the economy and seize the opportunities arising from these new market trends. And I think that in this regard, Switzerland is also a very good example, because we have seen, and this is not lastly because of the impact of the pandemic, an increased interest in consumers to look after the origin of the products they buy, to make them questions around how these are produced, which principles are respected or not. And we have seen in the case of Switzerland really an interesting increase of the request, the share of BioTrade, the share of organic trade in general in consumers' basket. And it's very nice to see that this trend is also reflected in other countries in the European context, but not only. So the BioTrade self-assessment tool, which we are also launching today, is a very important hands-on tool to self-assessment for business practices regarding BioTrade principles and criteria. And it's important to get a first diagnostic of areas for improvement. This allows to benchmark the BioTrade principles and criteria against relevant sustainability standards within the ITC sustainability map. And I think it's very interesting, the developments that we are seeing in terms of benchmarking, comparison between standards, the increased pressure for transparency, and this very practical tool is an important contribution in this discussion. We in particular welcome that ITC and UNCTAD have joined forces to develop the self-assessment tool, because they are very reputed and long-standing partners of SECO. Trade that is done in a sustainable manner will contribute to curbing biodiversity loss and promote sustainable use practice. We're really convinced that this is the way to go. And this is the very essence of BioTrade principles and criteria. They guide businesses to sustainable sources. They help to transform and commercialize goods and services derived from plants, animals, and ecosystem services. And they provide a clear pathway to businesses to achieve sustainability. And for those of you living in Switzerland, you know that we are currently having a quite interesting discussion around what sustainability needs to mean for businesses. There is even a vote that Swiss citizens will have to do in the next weeks, which shows really the importance of sustainability concerns for common citizens in this country. So it is very inspiring to see organizations, institutions, and associations teaming up to make things better. So we really commend UNCTAD and its partner for revising the BioTrade principles, for this very hard and thorough job that has been done, and for having able to enhance them, incorporate best practices, and also timely align them with international treaties, legal and policy frameworks that we know in the WTO context are very important and will remain important over the next years. In particular, the inclusion of marine biodiversity resources will help to benefit more actors, integrate more value chains and sectors, and making sure that we don't leave anyone behind. So we look forward for the continued partnership with UNCTAD on trade and biodiversity. We really repeat initiatives like this one is an exemplary initiative for creating economic opportunities for rural communities through trade while safeguarding nature. It is an imperative for our generation to take care of our planet so we can live in harmony with nature and ensure that future generations, not the ones that are among the participants of this webinar, but the new ones to come, that they really can benefit also for the nature and world that we live on. So again, congratulations to ITC, to UNCTAD, to the BioTrade team and its partners, and I wish you really a fruitful and inspiring webinar. Thanks.
Thank you, Monica, for those inspiring votes. SECO is even supporting a responsible business even ahead of the boat. So we are all in the right direction. So now we will have Yvonne Higuero, who represents a great partner to the BioTrade initiative, not only for the sustainability of wildlife, but also the link to livelihoods and the link to health today under this pandemic. So we leave Yvonne to present her words to the group. Welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am very grateful for your invitation to speak at this event, marking the launch of the revised principles and criteria for the BioTrade initiative. I extend my heartfelt congratulations to UNCTAD for their hard work in carrying this initiative forward. I believe this will contribute significantly to our shared sustainability goals and brings us closer to our common objectives. I would like to use this opportunity to Switzerland to SEC for supporting this initiative since it first began. For 20 years now, and all the more so after the signing of a memorandum of understanding between UNCTAD and the CITES secretariats in 2010, our collaboration on the BioTrade initiative has been steady, fruitful, and inspiring. From our perspective, it undeniably has also served the effective implementation of the convention. The BioTrade Principles and Criteria have incorporated the key CITES principles: legality, sustainability, and traceability. This has clearly been in the livelihood program has served to strengthen our understanding of the links between local communities, sustainable use of wildlife, and species conservation. The 12 case studies that we developed for CITES parties at COP18 was with extensive input from UNCTAD BioTrade, and they are a tangible example of this. These studies looked at the commercial use of various CITES listed species and the effects of this regulated trade on national economies, the law-abiding private sector, and the livelihoods of rural peoples living side by side with wildlife. The resulting studies are detailed best practices in the trade Sorry, there's noise in the background. Thank you. More recently, our joint work on the launch of UNCTAD's Blue BioTrade project for Queen Conch in the Caribbean showed, once more, the alignment of our objectives. In the context of CITES, prerequisites for trade in listed species, such as the obligation to perform non-detriment findings and legal acquisition findings, are key pillars to ensure the sustainability of international wildlife trade. The importance of these processes is fully echoed in various BioTrade principles. This is particularly clear in the wording fully endorsed parties' efforts to keep trade legal and traceable, and to demonstrate that sustainable use of biodiversity by rural and indigenous communities who depend on it the most can be a powerful conservation tool. The BioTrade principles have also given much weight to a crucial message that is central to the work of CITES, that of the genuine link between well-managed, sustainable trade in wildlife and the conservation of vulnerable yet valuable species. By fostering the involvement of private actors in the establishment of a sustainable model for the use of a bigger stake in the conservation of the species and ecosystems upon which their incomes and well-being may depend. The principles and criteria also lay out a roadmap for regulators and private economic actors to prioritize sustainability, an effort we both see as crucially important, and I hear the same from also our party, Switzerland, who just spoke before us, very important to the parties. UNCTAD's commitment to renew and update the BioTrade Principles and Criteria underscores the commitment principles will be of great value. Now more than ever, we must work together to establish a blueprint for a more balanced relationship with nature. We heard this loud and clear at the Biodiversity Summit, and we must do so while remaining grounded in reality, without forgetting that we will always rely on biodiversity to meet our most basic needs. In the CITES strategic vision, which is very much in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, we hope for a future where, through implementation of the Convention and other multilateral environmental of the BioTrade Principles and Criteria can serve as a roadmap to get there and contribute to making that vision a reality. Thank you very much, and I really look forward to listening to the presentations in this webinar.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, very clear. We are still having problems of audio, so all presentations and speeches will be put online on the webpage of the event after the event. So please bear with us, and we're turning off all the videos so we can have better audio quality. Thank you very much, Yvonne. Now we will have as a speaker the Secretary General of the CBD, Elizabeth Marema, who will be addressing all of us through video. So Rafe, if we can place the video. We're not listening, Rafe.
Julian, you have to unmute your mic. Thank you.
It's still not working. I cannot listen.
Julian, your mic is still on mute. Thank you.
I apologize for these technical problems. We're trying to fix and restart the video from the beginning. Again, I apologize. We tested the video before, but something seems to be giving us troubles. 2 minutes to fix, please.
Julian, you need to unmute your mic. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, warm greetings to you all. I want to thank UNCTAD and BioTrade Initiative for the kind invitation to speak at the launch of the revised BioTrade Principles and Criteria, and for the ongoing and long-standing collaboration between the Convention on Biological Diversity Secretariat and the UNCTAD. Economic and human activities are the backbone of our prosperity and development. However, they are also closely linked to biodiversity loss at rates never seen before. Last year, IPBS Global Assessment Report highlighted that a variety of economic, political, and social factors, including global trade, have shifted the economic and environmental gains. Furthermore, the losses of production and consumption are contributing to new economic opportunities, but also the impacts on nature and its contribution to people. The World Economic Forum, on its recently new Nature Economy series, highlighted that $44 trillion of economic value generation, over half of the world's total GDP, is potentially at risk as a result of the dependence of business on nature and its services. Biodiversity loss and ecosystems collapse ranked as one of the top 5 threats humanity will face in the next 10 years. Therefore, it is imperative that we identify opportunities and tools that ensure these underlying causes of biodiversity loss are acknowledged and addressed. Equally, the ever-expanding global value chain becomes much more sustainable. The relationship between trade, economic, and social development and environmental protection is extremely complex, particularly in developing countries and emerging economies. Part of this complexity stems from the fact that many of these countries rely heavily on natural resource-based products and raw materials for export, leading to an urgent need for them to diversify their economies, adapt, and adopt more sustainable trade practices. In that context, the BioTrade efforts to develop a set of principles and criteria which can be used by companies, governments, and civil society in a variety of countries, sectors, and value chains is very welcome. They will generate benefits to biodiversity standards and are a great example of successful mainstreaming and for linking global policy making to action on the ground. In 2021, governments will gather in Kunming, China to revisit global targets on protecting ecosystems and halting species loss. This is a critical moment as it provides us with a unique opportunity to engage with business and trade communities. It will also provide an opportunity to work towards the transformational and systematic changes needed to reverse biodiversity loss and enable us to live in harmony with nature by 2050. The Convention on Biological Diversity Community welcomes the updated version of the principles and criteria as a significant contribution towards the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and the Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing. We look forward to continuing our work with UNCTAD and the BioTrade Initiative as a valuable tool to scale up sustainable use of biodiversity, its conservation, and fair and equitable sharing of its benefits. Thank you for your time and for your continued support to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Madam Marina. With this, we finish the opening segment. We're going now, the next slide, Julian, on the agenda. We're going now to the interactive dialogue segment. And we will have, first of all, Lorena Jaramillo, who will present the 2020 BioTrade Principles and Criteria. Then we'll go to different partners explaining the core of each of the 7 2020 BioTrade Principles. Lorena, from now onwards, Lorena is going to chair on the principle 4. I will take it from 5 onwards. Lorena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Lorena. Thank you,
You're muted, Lorena.
Thank you, David. Excellencies, dear partners, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is a real pleasure to be here with you today in this landmark, as David and Monica mentioned, event for BioTrade and the trade and biodiversity community as we launched the BioTrade Principles and Criteria and the self-assessment tool. My presentation will focus on BioTrade and how does it work, but also on the new setup and the changes that are happening in this new revision. Next slide, please. So let me start my presentation by telling you about the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, which is the UN agency responsible for trade and development within the United Nations. It is dedicated to promoting the development-friendly integration of developing countries into the world economy. And for that reason, as a response to Agenda 21, in 1996, so over 20 years ago, it launched the BioTrade initiative with the aim to promote trade and investment in biodiversity-based products and services to further sustainable development in line with the objectives of the Convention on Biological Diversity, which refers to conservation, sustainable use, and beneficiary. BioTrade really connects the conservation and the sustainable use of biodiversity with the generation of livelihoods and income by seizing the opportunities that the market for sustainably sourced products and services provide. So that's why we are really in the core area of the circle that you see in front of you with economic, social, and environmental spheres of sustainable development. Next slide, please. So let me start to tell you what is BioTrade. So BioTrade relates to the activities of production, of collection, production, transformation, and commercialization of products and services derived from native biodiversity under social, economic, and environmental sustainability criteria. These criteria is it forms part of the 7 BioTrade principles that you can see in the screen in green. These principles were developed building on the experience of BioTrade practitioners and partners in early 2000 when we were trying to translate the concept into practice. We conceptualized it, developed several trials, also tested in the field, and after a couple of discussions, workshop, and testing, they were published by UNCTAD in 2007. Since then, they have been implemented by government, private sector, academia, and civil society in the development of biodiversity-based sectors, value chains, and businesses. Next slide. So the 7 principles and criteria are what you see on the screen. It combines approaches, 4 approaches: the value chain, adaptive management, ecosystem approach, and sustainable livelihoods. And the different mandates is what that comprises the BioTrade framework. And for us, it's essential as the BioTrade activities need to be aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, but that we were launched in 20 years ago. We were also aligned with the Millennium Development Goals, or at that time, the Commission on Sustainable Development. Also, BioTrade activities need to be aligned and supportive of the different mandates, and align with the objectives as principles of the multilateral environmental agreements such as CBD and CITES. Next slide, please. So just to give you a brief overview, these principles and criteria have been used by partners as we have been translating the different mandates to principles and criteria. For example, the first 3 principles and criteria of the BioTrade are directly linked to the first objectives of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Through these principles and criteria, partners at the national, regional, and international level have been used these principles as guidelines to select and assess companies, value chains, and sectors, and be able to identify what are the challenges that are being faced to develop them, but also the opportunities that need to be seized. So the BioTrade principles and criteria have been applied in a different context. You can be used to develop sector and value chains, where, for example, with national and regional programs, they have used them to identify the needs in developing like a value chain, such as those issues related to sanitary permits or the need to support access to international markets, but also help them to size the opportunities that are arising for the sectors. There's also the principles and criteria have been used as the BioTrade organization. So, for example, have been used to assess companies, projects, and organizations, and which are being assessed according to the BioTrade Principles and Criteria, and then you were able to develop work plans and monitor the results. It's important to highlight that the work that we're doing here is really, it provides practical experiences, but also tools and methodologies that we're also contributing upwards to the other process, for example, of CBDs and CITES, but also help us to enrich the overall work that they were doing in the ground. So next slide, please. So since 2007, BioTrade has been implemented in over 60 countries. In Africa, Americas, Asia, and Europe. It has been implemented in a variety of sectors where you see we've been working in the personal care, phytopharma, food, fashion, ornamental flora and fauna. We have also been working on ecosystem services, mainly working on sustainable tourism, like nature-based tourism, bird watching, mainly focused on terrestrial activities and a few experiences on wetlands. But we're also expanding, for example, with scuba diving that was developed with the BioTrade program in Ecuador. We have also seen how there's a lot of growing number of experiences and lessons learned that are very practical and applicable that help to enhance the BioTrade principles and criteria and its implementation. Throughout the years, we have seen, for example, in 2003, when the sales of BioTrade companies amounted only $40 million US. But now last year, the sales reported of companies implementing BioTrade principles and criteria, it amounted over 5 billion euros. So you have seen the significant growth, how BioTrade has been mainstream. Next slide. So, but also since 2007, also there is a legal and policy framework that have evolved. We have seen, for example, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs. We also saw the different mandates of UNCTAD as well. The current one on UNCTAD 14 that highlights the work of UNCTAD to continue working on trade and biodiversity. We also see, for example, the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011-2020 and the IG targets, and of course the ongoing process to negotiate the post-2020 global biodiversity framework that has also affected the BioTrade principles and criteria and the activities that we implement, and a very relevant framework is the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing that was adopted in 2010 and entry into force in 2014. It has really affected implementation of BioTrade activities in the ground, as well as other relevant frameworks, legal and policy frameworks such as the Paris Agreement, and as we're working with the marine realm, also the UN, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. Next slide, please. So, for all the past reasons about the relevant policy frameworks that are applicable to BioTrade, and also bearing in mind and enriching with the experiences of BioTrade practitioners in the ground, we launched in 2018 the revision of the principles of the 2007 version. It's also to keep the tools relevant, applicable, and better aligned to the ongoing processes that are underway. So we started with several workshops, webinars. We carry out comparative analysis of how partners are implementing the principles and criteria in different sectors, from flora, fauna to sustainable tourism. We were also receiving input from the revision of partners, such as the Union for Ethical BioTrade and their standard, that was able to provide also inputs to the 2007 version, and also from Peru that was revising their verification of the principles and criteria. So where do we stand now? We have the final version. It has been translated to French, Spanish, so you have it also in 3 languages and English. Jointly with ITC, we started the development of the BioTrade self-assessment tool that we will be presenting today. So what's the future? We will also be promoting the tool to other partners and stakeholders through webinars and trainings. So follow us on social media and all the work that we're undertaking. Next slide, please. So now we reach to the core of the presentation and the event, which is what changed. So if you see from the screen, the principles have been kept similar. The only change has been particularly on Principle 7, where the 2007 version make clear reference to land, to terrestrial biodiversity, and that we're expanding to terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems. The principles and criteria were more inclusive and broadened. Also based on the experience of BioTrade partners that are working on biodiversity-based products and services, changes were also reflected, mainly at the criteria level, to also consider the needs for compliance, for example, with the Nagoya Protocol. And all these changes have also generated some adjustment and expansion, I think, or strengthening the minimum eligibility criteria. But for example, we had the BioTrade activities we're implementing in working with terrestrial, inland, marine, and coastal biodiversity, would not involve activities involving the extraction of minerals, metals, oil, or gas, would not work with GMO, would not work with endangered species, would not introduce invasive species, or would not contribute to the degradation or transformation of ecosystems. But because we're including also the marine realm, additional minimum requirements were considered. For example, that BioTrade activities will not incorporate or directly support any form of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing or IUU fishing, and must apply the precautionary approach as defined by the United Nations Fish Stock Agreement, adding this to the approach that we have in relation to the Rio Principles. So through this sense, these have been the major changes at the criteria level. And in the next part where you see the dialogue, we will give you an overview of what have been these changes at the levels of criteria. So next slide. But before we go to the discussions, I wanted to highlight this is how you will see the BioTrade self-assessment tool that later on in the webinar, ITC Matthew Lamole will be presenting and will give you a first hand of the self-assessment tool of the updated principles and criteria, which was developed by Untitled and ITC under the SECO-funded Global BioTrade Program. And this tool allows companies to self-assess their performance against the updated principles and criteria. And also through this platform, you have at one entry point to BioTrade resources like publications, documents, guidelines that are being developed, but also it will tell you what are the partner organizations that are working. So this is in a nutshell what you will see later today in the webinar. So please stay tuned with us to have a live demo on the tool. So next slide, please. So now I will be moving to the interactive dialogue. That was a brief overview of what is BioTrade and the old and the new version. So through this interactive dialogue, we will be highlighting the main changes appearing at the criteria level, and also learn from the experiences and lessons learned of partners, but also of practitioners implementing BioTrade principles and criteria. And of course, the view of the updated version of 2020. So next slide, please. So this is how the current BioTrade principles and criteria look. There were under Principle 1, the BioTrade activities not only aim to conserve biodiversity, which what we were having that in the 2007 version, but now we're stating that BioTrade activities should also contribute to restore and enhance it. And this has been also implemented by some partners already in the ground. Also within BioTrade principles and criteria, we consider a comprehensive approach to biodiversity, looking at ecosystem, natural habitat, species, including endangered species, and ecological process for the terrestrial and marine realm. The marine realm has really been mainstream throughout the principles 1 to 7. They will see also afterwards. Then another important highlight, Principle 1 is that the activities should be aligned with national, regional, or local plans for sustainable management, conservation, and restoration, and in coordination with the relevant actors involved. On Principle 2, which relates to the sustainable use of biodiversity, it has been updated to reflect also the experience of BioTrade practitioners in the different activities being implemented. For example, BioTrade activities are based on management plans, agreed quotas on permits, and for example, for the marine biodiversity, we highlight that they should never engage in IUU fishing. I was telling you the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, but also that BioTrade activities related to sustainable tourism should consider studies related to the carrying capacity of the ecosystem, but also limits of acceptable change. Another important element of the Principle 2 is that considering this updated version is the reference to climate change resilience that BioTrade practitioners are already considering in their work, but also that consider the broader impact of BioTrade, not only on biodiversity, but also on soil, on water, on energy efficiency, and waste. So this is in a nutshell the BioTrade principles and criteria and the changes that have been highlighted. So now to show you how BioTrade partners and practitioners have been implementing BioTrade and its principles and criteria, let me introduce you to Maria Julia Oliva. She's the Deputy Director of the Union for Ethical BioTrade. So thank you very much, Julia, for being with us today.
Thank you, Lorena, and Untitled BioTrade Initiative for allowing me this space to be here. And it's a real joy to share in this moment. And whether we call it a milestone or a landmark, it really does reflect so much work that has gotten us to this point. And also, I think the commitment of this fantastic community to the work ahead. So certainly very, very happy to be here today. So as Lorena mentioned, I work for the Union for Ethical BioTrade, UEBT. We were created in 2007 as really a bit of a spin-off of the Untitled BioTrade Initiative with the focus on business engagement. So we are established as a nonprofit association, and our vision and our mission is really engaging with business and promoting the ethical sourcing of ingredients from biodiversity. So really what the core of our work is the Ethical BioTrade Standard, the UEBT standard, which takes the BioTrade principles and criteria and developed it into a full internationally recognized standard that applies to ingredients used from biodiversity for food, cosmetics, fragrance, flavors, natural pharmaceuticals. So we are a member of the ICL Alliance, as some of the other partners that you see there. So companies that join UEBT, that become a UEBT member, commit to implementing the practices defined in the Ethical BioTrade Standard. And our work is really to support them in that process and also to validate the progress towards their commitments. Next, please. So just to show you very quickly some of our members, and to highlight that our members include from small local associations in producer countries to processing companies, traders, and brands. So we work with different companies along the supply chains. Next, please. And just to tell you a little bit, this is out of our last annual report. We currently have over 60 members, and those 60 members are sourcing ingredients from biodiversity from almost 70 countries. And we have validated at the field level over 270 ingredients and supply chains. And there's over 700 supply chains where work is actually taking place on the ground to address people and biodiversity. Next, please. So just to really talk a little bit about what Lorena introduced and how these ideas then are translated into practice. So I mentioned that the standard is based on the BioTrade Principles and Criteria. And we've also just launched a new and revised version, which builds on the experiences to date. And as Lorena mentioned, also looks at some of the latest developments in law and policy, and which I'm very happy to say is fully aligned with the new BioTrade Principles and Criteria that we are launching here today. So it's very nice that this is all happening right now, and we have really state-of-the-art tools to move forward on BioTrade. Next, please. So as Lorena introduced, principles 1 and 2 are, at the core of ethical biotrade and the BioTrade Principles and Criteria. I always say that biotrade is about respect for nature and respect for people. So these are really the two principles that reflect this idea of respect for nature. And I talk about nature and not biodiversity because obviously biodiversity is a key aspect of it. And I remember when I was, started working with BioTrade, describing to companies the link between the species they were sourcing and habitats and other species. So this notion of biodiversity and interconnectivity is very important in the BioTrade concept. It's even been further strengthened in the current version. But there's also other broader issues linked to nature, and Lorena mentioned climate resilience, which is an important addition, and other ecological issues. In fact, when we look at these two principles, we're looking at some of the really hot topics when it comes to biodiversity and environmental issues. For instance, healthy soil. We're hearing so much about regenerative practices, and the BioTrade Principles and Criteria and the Ethical BioTrade Standard fully incorporate the regenerative practices in their provisions. We also have references to water conservation, to minimizing the use of external inputs, and to adapting to local conditions. Next, please. And I wanted to share with you just very quickly, because of course, it's important to set good practices, but it's even more important to inspire and support actors to take these practices on board. And this is where the idea of tools is really critical. And UBT has developed a tool called the Biodiversity Action Plans, which actually is a very practical, hands-on way for companies to address biodiversity in their supply chains. As you can imagine, we work with such a range of companies around the world in different types of ingredients. And this is a question that we would often get. Okay, we need to work on biodiversity. What does that work? What does that mean in my farm? I just have a small farm in Italy or Chile or Nigeria, or I'm wild collecting in Southeast Asia. How does that work? So this tool has really been developed to allow companies to gather baseline information on what the relevance of biodiversity is, where they're working, to set very concrete goals and targets, and to take measures to reach those targets. So we work with companies to develop work plans, and we also have a monitoring and evaluation system. So it's not just about a commitment or about a target, but it's really to be able to communicate how companies advance in their implementation and what positive impact they have on the ground. Next, please. And just to give you 3 examples, I won't go into them, but they're available on the UEBT website if you'd like to read more. We have taken biodiversity action plans forward in a variety of countries and situations, from rosehip in Chile, where it's a very interesting example because it is not a native species, but it is a species that it's very important for social reasons in Chile. So how do you work with a species that is invasive in a way that doesn't have any negative impact on the biodiversity in the area and actually promotes the social impacts? We have hibiscus in West Africa, we have spices in India, and we have bergamot, which is a lovely fruit sourced primarily for fragrance, but also if you like Earl Grey, you'll know that bergamot is a part of it coming from Italy. So just very concrete examples in ways that BioTrade Principles and Criteria, the ethical BioTrade standard, are already leading to positive impact in supply chains around the world. So thank you again, Lorena, other colleagues, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Julia, for your inspiring experiences and the importance of having tools to guide the private sector develop their businesses in a more biodiversity-friendly manner. And happy that the 2020 UBT standard is also supportive of the current BioTrade Principles and Criteria that were updated in 2020. So for this webinar, we also wanted to hear not only from partners, but also from practitioners that are implementing BioTrade in the ground. So let me introduce you now to Claude Promadon. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer of the Groupe Rocher, and he's also the chair of the Convention on Biological Diversity's Global Partnership for Business and Biodiversity. So, Claude, you have the floor. And
thank you, Lorena. Thank you, Lorena. It's a real pleasure to be with you, with friends, with all of you, and thank you for inviting me to speak and to with. The reason why I am here, it's the pleasure to say that yes, the Groupe Rocher is committed to the principle and the criteria, and committed to engage and to practice that kind of a frame. Why? Because this kind of frame are very important if they are coherent with the DNA of the group. And it is. From the beginning, our group was born thanks to a meeting between a man, a territory, and products linked to nature and sourcing with nature. And 60 years later, it is the same. We continue to be dedicated with 10 brands, with 3 billion turnover, to combine nature principle and business, economy and business. 3 examples: the cultivation of our own cosmetic in Lagacilly in Brittany, France, with agroecological methods that is very helpful for us. The second example is the participation to Nagoya Protocol from 2000 to 2014 with born guidance, experimenting on the field, non-monetary and monetary sharing, to try to put on the table some example for everyone. And the third example is our commitment with UBT now to embark all of our sourcing in a kind of sustainable and responsible way. Then the DNA of the company, of the organization, is absolutely crucial. The second reason why the principle are so important for us is the consciousness now that the crisis of Anthropocene is deep, is so huge that it requires some frame outside the company. For years, we have got some internal regulation, guidance, but today we need some supra guidance to make all of us more conscious about the reflex, the way we can operate, and that we can operate with other companies, with other bodies to go further but faster on the point. And that is very important. It's the reason why we decided to become benefit companies in 2019, because we know that today we have to embark all our partners, all the shareholders, the stakeholders, to make possible a very big gap in the mix between economy and business and biodiversity. Then our conviction is that that is very huge, but we have a chance. The criteria and the principle are coherent with what citizens and consumers are waiting for. That is very important. We know today, we know that a lot of people are living in cities. They are urban, and they need a connection, a deep connection with consumer, with nature, and we have to bring possibility for them to go on that dimension of life. Then my conclusion could be to share with you to live in harmony with nature, and people require such supra guidelines, a coherence with educational program, with spreading the way we can operate, we can make business in line with biodiversity preservation. Then internally in our group, we launch a big and wide program for educational program like Nature Academy. But I think your framework, the framework for UNCTAD, is very useful to make everyone able to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claude, for your inspiring and practical views. It's very useful for us to hear from BioTrade practitioners about the tools that we're developing and to know how they're being used in helping the businesses and the industry, but also the consumers to reconnect back to nature and to biodiversity, which we all need to if we want to live in harmony with nature. Thank you very much, Claude. So let's pass now to Principle 3. So I will be telling you about the changes that we're having under Principle 3, which deals with the fair and equitable sharing of benefits derived from the use of biodiversity. And the criteria under this principle have changed significantly, as mentioned, for example, to reflect the Nagoya Protocol that was entered into force in 2014. Also, the lessons learned from BioTrade practitioners and partners that have been adapting and implementing Nagoya Protocol and access and benefit sharing schemes. But also, the principle highlights the importance of contributing to local and sustainable development. One of the issues I also want to highlight under this principle is, for example, criteria 3.4, that refers to the need of BioTrade activities to respect applicable laws. That's when, for example, there are laws applicable at the country, but also 3.4 relates to the situation where there is no law or regulations on access and benefit sharing, and that the BioTrade activities need to respect ABS principles such as prior informed consent or mutually agreed terms. In a nutshell, what BioTrade principles are coming up. And let me introduce you now to Suel Al-Hanabi from the co-manager of the ABS Capacity Development Initiative. He will share us how the principles and criteria have been used to implement BioTrade and ABS compliant value chains in Africa. So, Suel, thank you, and you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Lorena. Good afternoon, colleagues, and I'm really honored to be part of this launch of the new BioTrade Principles and Criteria. And I was asked to provide a little bit of experience on how we made use of the old and probably will make much more use even of the new set of principles and criteria. I'm here and representing the ABS Capacity Development Initiative, which is a multi-donor initiative, which is, as Lorena said, mainly focusing on supporting the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol in Africa, but also Caribbean Pacific. And that's not only working together with governments on legal frameworks, but also with business, research, and with indigenous peoples, local communities, in establishing pilot value chains, and that derived then also in another program, Bioinnovation Africa, where it is precisely on these partnerships. Well, generally speaking, if you look at ABS, the Nagoya Protocol, and BioTrade, they're more like siblings, right? So they are relatives, they are from the same family, but of course they have very different characters, one would say. So one is, that's the BioTrade, which is the broader one, which is on biological resources, which is the one with the voluntary standards. And then we do have, of course, the Nagoya Protocol, which is a legally binding instrument, at least when it comes then to the case where user and providers are from the same and have both ratified the protocol. And they are also interrelated, because sometimes, of course, if research and development in the sense of the Nagoya Protocol was undertaken, then this can lead to product development, to an innovation based on an active ingredients, which you can either then synthesize, or you can, of course, then use this very component based on a supply chain in a biological resource. So you would need to build up a supply chain under certain sustainability criteria. And this is exactly where in our work then the BioTrade principles and criteria come in, so that we are not looking only at the equitable sharing of benefits that derive from the utilization of the genetic resources, but on the other hand, of course, to secure the supply chain. And we do also see that, of course, ABS, which is based on supply chains, is much more impactful than if it was then, for example, just on synthesization of products. So this is on the one hand that BioTrade is based on ABS, but on the other hand, you also see quite often that there is BioTrade ongoing, and because a certain biological resource is known to industry, they start undertaking R&D. So this is how the loop is being closed at the other angle. And now looking at the principle 3, and Lorena has just walked through the different elements of it. They are on the one hand mirroring what we see in the Nagoya Protocol. So it was quite important, of course, to update them to the PICMAT aspects, but of course they are also complementing them. In particular, now the principle 3.5, where a reference is made to situations where there is no legal requirement. So where there's, for example, still an ABS regulation underway, it's been under development, or there would be even PIC and MAT would be waived, that even if you were not legally obliged to apply criteria and share benefits, that you would do this. And this is quite helpful. It was helpful in the past. Examples like argan showed it that even in the absence of a legal requirement, quite sound benefit sharing agreements were able to be put in place. We do have this in Cameroon, in Namibia, and many, many countries where we see that basically ABS is implemented on biological or on genetic resources, even in the absence of legal requirements. And I think there the BioTrade principles and criteria do play a pivotal role. And maybe to conclude, I think that, and it was also said by Elizabeth earlier, that they are coming now to a very key point in time, because, as you know, the post-2020 framework is currently now under negotiation, under development, and there is one goal, of course, that is looking at access and benefit sharing. And there are there's only little, let's say, reflection now beyond the financial benefits, the monetary benefits that could be shared to measure them. But I think that the suite of what we find in the BioTrade principles and criteria, so just to mention words like transparency, dialogue, sustainability, that this so far has not been adequately taken into account in the international negotiations to look at what impact do we want to achieve when it comes to benefit sharing, also under the Nagoya Protocol. So I believe that if one had a closer look now, also at the level of the CBD, when it comes then to the positioning of benefit sharing and ABS under the framework, the BioTrade Principles and Criteria could well serve as a compass and further inspiration, as both ABS and BioTrade are meant as means of incentivization for conservation of biodiversity and sustainable development as a whole. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Suel, for your kind intervention and for exemplifying the experiences of how been working in Africa, and how and also for the views on how the updated principles and criteria can be further contribute to the important discussions of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you very much, and let me pass now to Principle 4. So I will guide you. Principle 4, which relates to the socioeconomic sustainability. Under this principle, the organizations involved in biotrade activities require business systems to function in line with industry and market requirements, which considers issues such as traceability, documentation, and quality systems. It is important to note that the reference to supply chain traceability has been strengthened under this principle, as well as the integration of the BioTrade Principles and Criteria into companies and supply chain management. So with this, I would like to pass the floor to Federico Vignati, Principal Executive from the Development Bank of Latin America. He will show us how a development bank like us is using the BioTrade Principles and Criteria as a guideline to support companies to build sustainable economic models and access to finance. So Federico, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much to everyone. Thank you and good afternoon, actually, ladies and gentlemen. As always, it's a pleasure and an honor for us to keep on this ongoing work that has started around, and please correct me, Lorena, but it's already around 11 years, I think, of collaboration between CAF and the I may say the not only the UNCTAD team, but the BioTrade community, which has been able to reinforce its role and its practice in these years. We would like to start really providing a congratulation to all the UNCTAD team. We also welcome very much these collaborative efforts that have been done so far with organizations such as the ITC, the International Trade Center, and of course ECHO, and the CBD, and of course the interesting role that has been made by the UEBT, by the Union for Ethical Biotrade, providing instrumental and having, I may say, an instrumental role, somehow linking companies in a very interesting way, a very practical way, and providing us with very interesting market information on trends and interest. So we would really like to congratulate all this ongoing work and this teamwork that has been done and led by UNCTAD, and which has given us the opportunity to update based on the experience and the lessons learned that we have accumulated so far, to learn and improve this tool that we're all integrating in our operational efforts that in support with companies around the world, and in our case specifically in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have been working first in the Andean BioTrade project in 4 countries in more than 17 different value chains, Based on this experience, we developed the Latin American Cocoa Initiative, an initiative that we've been working with 8 countries from Mexico to Bolivia. This was a spin-off of our expertise and the lessons learned in the project before, and the need to be precise in supporting countries in particular market development areas. We also work very much, and we appreciate very much all the UNCTAD efforts to work in the blue BioTrade, I won't say principle, but the blue BioTrade concept that was launched within one of the BioTrade events coordinated by UNCTAD, in this case in particular with the collaboration of David. And all this process of learning and acting has taken us to understand the blue BioTrade in a different way, not only in terms of what can companies do, but how this works very much in a world where the financial system is looking forward what we can call impact investment funding. Okay, so we've been discussing this with Lorena, and Lorena has always been like very much enthusiastic and helping us very much in try to build together this kind of thinking, and we came to the conclusion that the investment funds are targeting social, environmental, and economic requirements. These requirements, they're not easy. There's not an easy consensus around them. However, the BioTrade Principles and Criteria, especially the ones that we have right now reviewed, they provide a reference standard to select initiatives that may access impact investment funds. This is very important. This is a very important message, that a spin-off for companies that may comply with the BioTrade standard is something we need to work in to make them to make them qualified, to make them part of something bigger. That is what we know is happening right now. That is what we call ESG investments, or we can call impact investment funding. Impact investment funding is not just about funding loans, credits, equity, but it could also integrate grants and cash and guarantees. So it's very much along the type of challenges that BioTrade companies need to face in their everyday basis. Okay. So for example, we're developing an impact investment hub in Peru named the Madre de Dios Sustainable Landscape Initiative. This hub provides access to impact investment funding to BioTrade businesses working with acai, Brazilian nut, giant snail, and sustainable tourism, among others. Okay. This investment hub is implemented in partnerships, in this case with local governments, the Smithsonian Institution, Inca Terra, the AGI Group, RAMSA, and also an important investment fund that is called Campbell. It's an investment fund oriented to the forestry sector. Okay, so this is a good example of how we can work in a proactive way, in a different creative approaches that we could bring together this kind of thinking. I mean, landscape approach for conservation, and also join impact investment. That we believe is something that there's appetite for this kind of approaches for the investment funds. They need this, and the standards provide a reference standard. The BioTrade principles, provide a reference standard for this kind of, to get legitimacy and consensus. Okay, so we're very glad to continue our collaboration with UNCTAD, very much to keep on working strong and hard and in a proactive way with all the team, with Lorena and David and the rest of the team, not only at UNCTAD, but also with SECO and the emerging and consolidated partners. And we wish you all the best and health to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we will start now. Principle.
Thank you, Federico, very much.
Can I go, Lorena, with principle 5 now? Okay. Thank you very much, Federico. It's always important to listen the view of the financing entities, especially because that's one of the issues that always come first when expanding BioTrade. Now, thank you for your comments. Now we're going to go, Julian, show the slides. We're going to go for principle 5. Of all BioTrade principles that usually are guidance and voluntary nature, this is the less voluntary. This is about compliance with national regulations and international legislation or agreements. In this case, it's obvious that the BioTrade organization must comply with applicable legal and administrative requirements on all the aspects we have seen, all the sustainability aspects we have seen. Nevertheless, when there is a conflict of a lack of alignment between the principles and the national legislation, we encourage organizations to meet the stricter requirements in terms of stricter sustainability. So more towards conservation and sustainable use. The compliance with international legislation has changed a lot. The first is that we have clustered in principle 5 or criteria 5.2 all the biodiversity-based agreements, the traditional ones that we have like the CBD or CITES, but also the newer ones like the Nagoya Protocol, but also conventions on migratory species and plant genetic resources, as well as other social aspects like the UN Declaration of Indigenous Peoples, rights of peasants and other people working in the rural environment. 5.3 is also a more important novelty in that sense because it lists the international agreements that will be relevant for BioTrade organizations who are working in the marine environment, including UN CLAWS, the Convention of the Law of the Sea, which is the constitution of the sea, with important principles on jurisdiction and freedoms. Then we have the UN Fish Stocks Agreement applicable to migratory species of high value across the seas, and as well as FAO soft law, UNTAC soft law, UN Environment soft law, ILO soft law, etc., which is very important in this case. Another aspect is that it's not only complying about compliance of these agreements, but keeping all records or information that is relevant to ensure, to show, to prove, to evidence that we are complying, including country of origin, geographical location, and all permits and certificates that are necessary to ensure that compliance. Now, to go deeper into this principle, we will have a video by the Vice Minister of Foreign Trade of Peru. Peru has been a leading example, Mr. Diego Llosa Velázquez. We will show a video intervention as he could not be with us today. Please, Julian, the video. Again, but the audio problem.
Unmute, maybe Julian, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. For me, it's an honor to participate in this important event, launch of the 2020 BioTrade Principles and Criteria. Peru is part of the 10 most diverse countries in the world and has the second largest planet, Amazon forest. Peru has more than 84 life zones of the 117 systems in the world, as well as 11 ecoregions of a wide variety of flora and fauna. Due to this diversity of ecosystems, species, genetic resources, and ancestral cultures with traditional knowledge, the United Nations Environment Program has considered Peru as one of the group of 17 countries in the world, which together concentrate more than 70% of the planet's biodiversity. For this reason, we have developed public policies for the conservation of the biodiversity and the sustainable use of its components. In the case of foreign trade sector, Peru's National Strategic Export Plan 2025 provides us with a framework for the internationalization of companies, considered as part of the strategies the development of competitive, sustainable, and diversified offerings, resulting in action plans focusing the strengthening of native biodiversity, as well as the development of exportable supply. So our country has a National Commission for Biotrade Promotion, formed by institutions from the public and private sector, and academia. The objective of the National Commission is to establish policies, strategies, and action lines, as well as to be the interinstitutional space that provides political and technical support for the development of biotrade. In this way, we promote biotrade as a sustainable business model. This year, the National Commission celebrated 10 years of being created. Since 2016, we have a national biotrade strategy and its action plan 2025, prepared by the members of the National Commission and other actors related to the development and promotion of products derived from native biodiversity, developed under criteria and environmental, social, and economic sustainability. The interinstitutional work of the Commission has allowed us to have legal framework related to the conservation of native biodiversity in Peru, in order to promote trade initiatives for biodiversity products and services in a responsible manner. For example, we can mention the law that establishes the regime for the protection of collective knowledge of indigenous peoples related with biological resources, or the solid waste law. Peruvian companies that apply the BioTrade model carry out an evaluation under compliance of the principles and criteria, whose objective is to contribute to the integration of a sustainable value chain towards efficient and fair markets. Currently, we are attending the growing international demand for functional products with our native biodiversity products. In 2019, these products represented exports of $423 million. The Principles and Criteria verification tool has a fundamental role in the development of biotrade in Peru. It incorporates normative elements that allow the evaluation of compliance in Peruvian SMEs. The BioTrade Principles and Criteria tool was used in Peru for the first time in 2007 with 20 companies. Nowadays, we have 77 companies verifying principles and criteria. They apply BioTrade business model, which can use the BioTrade national seal for a period of 2 years. The 2020 version of the BioTrade Principles and Criteria will let companies improve their conservation practices, as well as have a better approach to access to genetic resources and traditional knowledge. Additionally, strengthen the company's compliance in the future, thus contributing to the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals. Our commitment is to continue working so that more companies incorporate biotrade as a sustainable business model. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We heard the video from Mr. Josa. Now we'll go to Principle 6. Julian, can we show the slides, please? Principle 6 is about respect of the rights of actors involved in biotrade activities, meaning those that directly are in the operation of the value chain. Now, here the obligations is very clear. The organizations must respect rights of all the actors involved, including human rights, labor rights, and rights of indigenous people and other vulnerable groups, including women, children, and other. And I think this is not only an issue of compliance, it's a model, an element of ethical behavior. Now we're going to have with us Rudolf Luti from, we call him Rudy, head of the Department of Sustainable Inclusive Economy of Helvetas, who has been working on making rural value chain sustainable in environmental and social terms. Rudy, you have the floor. Could you show yourself the video and audio, please? We don't see you. We don't. Rudy's not around. I'm concerned. Lorena, could you call Rudy while we go? If not, we'll go for principles.
He's there. He's there. Rudolf Rudy. He's there. Rudy, can you?
Rudy, could you unmute and show the video so we can see you? Don't be shy. You're a very nice person.
There. Rudolf. No.
No, I don't see him. Perhaps he's having problems with the Wi-Fi. Lorena, shall I go for 7 or wait?
Just 2 minutes or go. Let me.
I apologize. It has been, we have many participants today, more than 250, which makes the connection a little bit heavy. So I apologize for these little problems. We're waiting for Rudy. Rudy, we see you. I can see you, but you are muted and you are not showing the video. Lorena can call him. Perhaps he went for a coffee.
Ray, can you assist?
Could you unmute Rudolf Luti, please?
I just sent him a unmuting request. I can't actually control his microphone.
So
go ahead, and then we go.
Then we go with the next one. We will be going back to Rudolf Nuti from Helvetas. Perhaps there is a technical problem. We'll find out. I apologize for that. We'll go for principle.
David.
Finally. Last but not least, we have Rudolf Nuti with us. Sorry to make you suffer.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. And apologize, I just had really a computer problem when I wanted to switch on video. Somehow the program started to stop to work. So thank you, and David, thank you, Lorena, thank you all who have organized this wonderful webinar on the changed principles and criteria of the BioTrade initiative. So as we have now heard a lot about the overall policy and conceptual framework, and of course this long and very fruitful process of coming up with this very valuable principle and criteria. So I was asked basically to share with you a bit a showcase or at least a case from the field, a case which should demonstrate that the principle and criteria, they are not only on paper and they are not only a concept, but they are really real stories and cases. And what I'm going to do as a representative of Helder Swiss Intercorporation, who implements a project called Regional BioTrade Project in the Mekong region, a project which is financed by SECO. I'm going to give you a case from Myanmar. But maybe first a few words about the project. So the project is now in its second phase, and it is working in Vietnam, Laos, and Myanmar. Its main targets are poverty and biodiversity preservation and poverty reduction and biodiversity preservation, but of course also is focusing on increasing productivity, stimulating exports of natural ingredients based on sustainability and ethical produced natural ingredient products. The project's approach is mainly working through companies who are committed to work on sustainable and efficient supply chains, and of course on relevant natural ingredients which contribute to biodiversity in the Mekong region. As many of you know, Mekong region is of course a biological or biodiversity hotspot with a lot of species still preserved in basically natural conditions, forests, wetlands, but of course also in more or less intensive agroecosystems. The project has basically 4 main outcomes: effective trade intermediation, efficient links to buyers and sellers of BioTrade products. Outcome 2, BioTrade companies have a business process and management capacities needed to export and grow, and supply chains of BioTrade companies are managed in ways that contribute to biodiversity and to social and economic equality. Fourth outcome is increased awareness of BioTrade enables stronger regional, national enabling environments for BioTrade and biodiversity through better and sustainable sourcing practices and enhanced trade. So this is about the frame under which the project is implemented. Here, as David already introduced, we are talking about criterion 6, which is respect for rights of actors involved in BioTrade activities. And here, this particular project and the particular case I'm going to share with you is really on a company in Myanmar, a company which is a typical small and medium enterprise, a family-owned business, very well anchored in a region of Myanmar, and it focuses on a tree, a fruit of a tree called jujube, or also with the Latin name Sisyphus mauritania. We have assessed this already existing value chain as being highly relevant to contribute to biodiversity, local agro-ecosystems. The tree itself is often grown in agroforestry system, so it is a tree that is also highly climate resilient. It sustains drought. It contributes to diverse livelihood incomes, and also very important, especially under criterion 6, it is empowering women who are often vulnerable and often disadvantaged in rural communities. The company is basically sourcing dried jujube, which are collected from 20 villages around the factory in a perimeter which is below 50 kilometers. So it's we talk here about relatively short value chains, which are, of course, also there's a climate dimension in it. This company called Salai Shai Saung is basically processing this dried jujube into jujube syrup, into fruit jam, into toffees, which are kind of nutritious snacks, which are a good alternative to most of the less reputed snacks, which have sometimes negative effects on modern diets. The company's revenue is about $500,000 in 2018, 625,000 in 2019. So clearly a company which we believe will grow, has the potential to grow, and really makes important contribution to the local economy. The company has about 56 staff, of which 51 are female. Here also empowerment for women who normally would have to migrate to cities to get jobs. Here the company provides jobs locally, ensures income, and of course empowers women because they bring home revenues which contribute to the improvement of livelihoods of rural communities. That is a bit the profile of the company. So now in terms of BioTrade, what typical the company does. So it invests in a value chain which has high value indigenous biodiversity crop. It's not only actually jujube, it's also tamarind, which is another tree crop fruit, which is harvested and then converted into different higher value products. The product development is based on indigenous knowledge, and here I think this is also an important criterion under 6. It really uses knowledge that was there in the community before, develops it and brings it in higher value markets. Important to also say is that the company applies a quality-based premium payment, which is almost 20% above the normal market value at farm or normal farm gate prices, and in particular related to criterion 6 to the rights of actors. It secures and saves jobs and incomes, mainly for women. Not only on the processing side you have women, but also on the farmer side. I mean, the collection and the caring for these jujube trees is mainly a women task. Also, in the the collectors themselves, those are mostly women folks who go into the villages and ensure that the product flows from the farm gate to the factories. Another very important aspect here was, and this is now very relevant for the recent COVID situation we all experienced, the project supported these companies in developing measures so that the company doesn't have to shut down. It mobilized the Ministry of Health, build capacities, how to create procedures that people can have social distancing and that they can still continue work and secure actually also income. So here also a very important criteria, which is under criterion 6. Then as I mentioned before, a female-dominated supply chain throughout the value chain, women empowerment, family, which ensures family income, and the companies through the project and by mobilizing companies and consultants, biodiversity consultants like UBT or Profound, to help companies to basically build their standards in line with the BioTrade principles. What we have heard before from Julia is that the consultant supports these companies in building these biodiversity action plans, which includes, of course, standard operational procedures like good manufacturing practices, health and safety measures, but then, of course, higher up in the value chain also secures resource management plans, all of this contributing to maintaining and being compliant with the BioTrade standard. There also, of course, there is a dimension of capacity building. I mean, through the standard operation procedures, laborers and also, of course, also farmers, they increase their capacities, their knowledge, and their awareness of the importance of biodiversity. Last but not least, the company also secures not only the market for farmers, but of course also the jobs for women, as I mentioned before, who have very important incomes through the company. In conclusion, as we have heard, the BioTrade and the principles and criteria are very nice on paper. They contribute, of course, to all the larger sustainability frames and policies, but it's not only a concept, it's also reality. BioTrade and basically exists everywhere, but it's often not recognized and valued as such. So a lot more has to be done to recognize, to value, and to of course, highlight the importance of biodiversity and how it contributes to a local, but of course also a global economy. And BioTrade policy frameworks and incentives contribute to the multiple dimensions of SDGs, but definitely deserves a better recognition. And one thing we also observed now during this recent COVID pandemic situation, that in the BioTrade sector, in the natural ingredient sector, we observed that companies have been very resilient and companies were not shut down. The trade and the demand actually sustained, and companies were able to adapt and to optimize processing units so that they didn't have to stop work and could ensure incomes. With this, I would like to give back to you, David. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Rudolf. It's great because you bring us a little bit of reality check to what we do, and the need to look at what's going on the ground, especially in the Southeast Asia region and Mekong region. So thank you for your friendship and partnership. Now we're going to Principle 7. If Julian could put the slides. Here is a very important principle, is the last but not the least, because this is the only one that we change at the principle level. Before, it used to be clarity on land use, okay, and tenure rights. Now it's neutral. It includes land, but it's applicable to natural resources in general, whether of terrestrial origin or marine origin. Sometimes you don't have a tenure right, but you have an access right. This is typical case of fisheries. In this case, basically organizations must comply with relevant laws and regulations related to the access and use of those resources. Nevertheless, there is a lot of customary law related to the access and use of those resources. Many indigenous forests, coastal communities has been in interaction and using those resources for centuries, even some predating the state. So they have rights that are of a higher value than rights that could be recently granted to companies seeking access. And that's not only in terms of tangible, but also in terms of intangible. Also, the use of resources by organizations, by trade companies, should not threaten, negatively impact the livelihood of these people that are not necessarily related to the value chain in question. So they should apply the principles of not to harm. Now, to illustrate that, on Principle 7, we have an ambassador. We have Stephen Fevrier, who is a very close friend to UNTAC and all the partners, and he's gonna present the recent experience of a pilot we're doing to trying to implement the BioTrade principles to the blue environment, to the marine environment in the Queen Kong value chain. Stephen, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues. Thank you, David. At the outset, allow me to convey warm wishes to one and all on behalf of the Director General of the OECS Commission, Dr. Didicus Jules. Allow me also to renew to you, colleagues and friends, the warmest regards from the OECS member states. I too am honored to have been offered the opportunity to share with you on my own reflections on the importance of the new principles and criteria of BioTrade, as well as its link to an exciting new project that the OECS is partnering with UNCTAD and CITES on. Let me first congratulate UNCTAD and their partners for updating the principles which are critical to embedding the twin imperatives of environmental and economic sustainability into sustainable development. I believe one of the most succinct explanations given of the principles was offered earlier today by Ms. Monica Rubiolo of SECO. Allow me to paraphrase. Production should not take place at the expense of the environment. This, I believe, we should keep as a North Star of our collective agendas as we move forward. Chair, allow me also to take this opportunity to thank the Swiss authorities and in particular SECO for their continuing support and their dedication to this work. So today my presentation in its first part will allow me to share with you a bit on my own impressions of the importance of the new principles and criteria to sustainable development projects, particularly in the OECS. So, Chair, for us in the OECS, being small and vulnerable economies, there is, of course, the need to preserve and secure biodiversity. And this we see as being key to our long-term sustainable development. Therefore, pivoting to more sustainable means of production is vital. For us, the revision of the BioTrade principles and criteria as well as the United Nations Oceans Conference and the Blue BioTrade report, Harnessing Marine Trade to Support Ecological Sustainability and Economic Equity, the OECS Commission decided to take these principles into account and really embark together with UNCTAD and CITES in a recently launched project on Blue BioTrade, which really is a spin-off of the BioTrade principles. It is pioneering the BioTrade principles and criteria in the marine sector. So under the updated 2020 BioTrade principles and criteria, BioTrade organizations and activities comply with principles and obligations of relevant international agreements, such as CITES, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, the Nagoya Protocol on Access and Benefit Sharing, ILO conventions, but also those related to the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, the United Nations Fish Stock Agreement, and the relevant conventions and instruments under the FAO, among with other related access to natural resources protocols. We consider that the incorporation of marine and other aquatic biodiversity and sustainable tourism as new elements of the updated 2020 BioTrade principles and criteria is key to conserve, restore, sustainably use our oceans while generating livelihoods for local communities depending on biodiversity in coastal and island developing countries. One significant change in the 2020 BioTrade principles and criteria is related, as previously indicated by David, to Principle 7, clarity on right to use and access to natural resources. In the 27 principles and criteria version, this principle would only apply to land tenure rights. Now it is wider in scope and includes the rights of access, use to natural resources. This is a very common right of coastal communities, as they have been fishing and using marine resources at hand for livelihoods since before many states were even created. This access and use rights are of historical nature and usually based on customary practices. The inclusion of this and other new elements in the 2020 BioTrade principles has been critical in the thrust that the OECS has placed and the trust that the OECS has placed in UNCTAD for the development of a pilot project on Blue BioTrade for our region. This project will undertake an evaluation and strategic planning for the value chain of queen conch, a CITES-listed species whose global market was estimated at US $74 million in 2017. In this value chain, most of the actors are artisanal and small-scale, informal fishers, as the harvest is done by diving. BioTrade business interested in the harvesting and processing of conch products will ensure, in light of Principle 7, the respect and application of existing access and sustainable use regulations, and obtain prior informed consent for the use of any associated traditional knowledge in a way that does not undermine food security of those coastal communities. In sum, the application of sustainable guidelines that encompass economic, environmental, and social criteria to promote sustainable development by connecting marine biodiversity and trade is a valuable tool to empower small-scale coastal producers in the OECS member states of Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines to harvest, add value, produce, and trade Queen Kong products in both domestic and international markets in a sustainable way. We believe that the publication of the updated BioTrade Principles and Criteria is particularly timely, as the implementation can help in generating resilience towards COVID-19 and building back better for COVID-19 blue recovery in small island developing states. Chair, thank you very much for this opportunity. We look forward to exploring additional avenues to embed the principles and criteria in other sustainable projects in the coming months and years. We hope that this discussion will also whet the appetites of other partners who are interested in embarking on this journey with us in the OECS. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for these refreshing views and explaining the case of Queen Kong, especially in a community that is not so used yet to the sustainable use and support for marine products and value chains. Also, we have here among us Paolo Bifani, who was the lead writer of the Blue BioTrade report. He's also among us in case people want to interact or ask him questions. Now we're going to pass to another segment. We finished the interaction of the BioTrade Principles and Criteria. We have done a deep dive on many of them and showing practical experience. Now we're going to go even more practical. We're going to show how the new tool being developed by UNTAC and ITC on the self-assessment can help value chains, can help companies to really assess the compliance and application of BioTrade principles, but also link them to other standards. So we have here with us Mathieu Lamol. He's gonna, I hope I pronounced it well, Mathieu. Now the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you so much, David. I hope that you can all see my screen. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks a lot to UNCTAD for the collaboration with ITC all these years on this global BioTrade program. It's a real pleasure to be with you today and to give you this practical sight on the self-assessment tool that we have built for companies that would like to learn more and practice very concretely those BioTrade principles and criteria. So basically, what I will do in the next few minutes is just give you a little background about the work that we have done and this partnership between ITC and UNCTAD. I will also give you a live demo of the self-assessment tool. So I will be clicking on the internet website and show you how everything is working, and step by step, basically how the tool can be leveraged by the different partners and companies in particular. So as most of you on the call know, ITC is a United Nations agency working together with UNCTAD and sitting in between the UNCTAD and the WTO when it comes to actually providing support to SMEs globally. So really the mandate of the ITC is to enable private companies to take on board good practices in international trade, to access new markets, and of course, to do this in a very sustainable way, adhering to the Sustainable Development Goals, social, environmental concerns on top. So this is what ITC has been doing since 1964. So this is like a long time that we are in place. And this is with great pleasure that we are teaming up with UNCTAD and complementing the expertise that we have to build this tool. So now the BioTrade self-assessment tool, we have discussed at length the 7 principles, where this is coming from and the different prospects that it offers to private companies. So we have developed an online application that enables anyone absolutely free of charge to access a diagnostic tool to self-evaluate, to self-assess what are the practices that the company would be putting in place in order to comply, to adhere to those big principles and criteria. The tool itself can be accessed at the portal that you see here. So sustainabilitymap.org/biotrade_UNCTAD. And my colleague Anna Battaglione, she is also online today. She's done a tremendous amount of work on this, liaising with all colleagues at ITC and UNCTAD. Thank you so much, Anna. She is also available for any questions in the chat, and she may also provide the link directly in the chat for all of you to click and to already be online and follow my demonstration. So just before I go online with you, or just showing it and you listen and you see how it works, just a few features that is important that you keep in mind. This self-assessment tool, because it is jointly developed by the ITC and UNCTAD, it is a neutral tool. It is built on independence. We are not there to blame and shame companies that would not be performing perfectly. We are there to help and to identify areas of improvement. The tool is, as it is actually supported, thank you so much to SECO, by public sector. This is a global public good. It is free of charge and everyone can benefit from it, right? So this is very important to remember: the neutrality, the independence, and the characteristics that this is free of charge. Every company can start running a diagnostic online and basically answering a few questions, after which you have the results that tell you where you probably have to improve and where your company is already up to speed. And so this is really the main characteristics that the tool will offer. I'm actually going to switch now my screen, and hopefully you can still see it. I'm not in my PowerPoint anymore. I am in this website. So this is sustainabilitymap.org/biotrade_UNCTAD. This is the web link. On this page, this is the homepage of this customized platform for the tool. It is rather what we call the BioTrade knowledge sharing and the self-assessment tool, because there are many things that you can find on this website. Obviously, as a short introduction, you have about this page, and this is a short introduction like you have in any website. This is about BioTrade. This is about sharing knowledge, experience. This is also about networking with partner organizations and companies linked to BioTrade. You can click on the different tabs that you see here on the horizontal menu: about the page, what is the BioTrade, who are the partners, and you can see here the whole list of the partners that have actually contributed to this work that we are inaugurating today. And then, of course, the self-assessment tool itself. The self-assessment tool, you can see here, there are two logos, and this is because we currently have in the system two self-assessment questionnaires. We have one for terrestrial food sector, and then we have for non-food. These are the two ones. Important to note that we are also moving into other self-assessment questionnaires. So in the coming weeks, we will also have marine, a specific questionnaire for marine sector, and then also on tourism, terrestrial and marine. So these are additional ones that will be appearing here. So before I click and open the tool, just want to show you the rest of this page. So just below here, you have the world map where you can see some partners, and obviously here as well, where you would be able to click, let's say, any of our institutions that are parted here. They have a profile on the sustainability map. They have a profile in the self-assessment tool. Would you click on it, you have just a little bit more detail, more information on this organization. It loads a specific page where we have designed information enabling you to know more about it. So here we have from Peru. So there is the link where they are based, and there is additional information in there. So we have all of this directly embedded into the page. So you can, of course, look for the other partners. And below this, knowledge sharing, I mentioned before, we have a library. It's a library with very highly relevant publications and resources. You can browse them through using some of the filters, like a specific product category or a country. But below that, you see you have all of them. So here we've got one publication in Spanish about cacao fino de aroma para America Latina. And before here, we've got the UEBT Biodiversity Barometer 2020, and a lot of very interesting resources, which again, I invite everyone to discover. By just clicking on the title here, you will access the publication or the resource, and you can also see a little bit more of the tags. So the knowledge sharing is really at your disposal. If you realize that some additional publications should be added, please contact us and we'll be more than happy to enrich the publications. Now, self-assessment tool. So a questionnaire online for companies. You see, we have those two questionnaires here. You may be able to click on one, and in order to access it, you have first a short introduction about that BioTrade questionnaire, what it is really about, what are the requirements, and then there is this button, take the self-assessment. What you do need for a self-assessment is a user account. So here I'm already logged in with my user account. If you do not have a user account, before loading the page, you will see, please register. All you need is an email address or a phone number and create a password. The process is very simple and it is free of charge, as I said before. Once you are logged in, you have the questionnaire and you have a very simple 5 steps process to actually review your questions. So the questionnaire is broken down into different categories that we have in the ITC sustainability map category. So this is about the environment and the social issues, management, quality, and each of the criteria you have to answer is linked to a particular part and a portion of the principles. Like here, we have a question related to maintaining soil qualities and particularly a reference to the BioTrade Principles and Criteria 1.1 and 2.2. So you can easily navigate the different pieces of the questionnaire by clicking on a chapter element and then answering the questions by yes or no. Yes or no, are you actually implementing those practices? And leaving a comment will really help you to get some feedback and to be able to improve over time based on the diagnostic and the roadmap. So the questionnaire is very much a straightforward process of answering the questions and then going through the assessment process until you reach a certain process, results. So the results you can save and continue at any time. You don't need to do the whole thing in one go. If you need to take like some consultations or some time or take a break, you just save and the assessment will always be visible in your dashboard. Once you have done the whole section and you want to look at the results, even if the assessment is not finished, you will click see the results. And here you have, for instance, the responses where you clicked yes or no, and this is my demo. So obviously I just answered a few questions for the sake of my presentation today. But you see here, I have my yes or no indicated by a green tick or a red cross, answering the questions vis-a-vis the UNCTAD BioTrade. So I can at any time look side by side my responses against the UNCTAD BioTrade Principles and Criteria. So this is very important that you have access to this information at any time, anytime you log in to your account, and you would be able to then look at the final results. Once you are done, once you click finalize, the button here that you can see on the screen, click finalize. This is when the assessment renders the results. And obviously I didn't complete perfectly. I have only a 33% average compliance or adherence. It's just because I didn't answer most of the questions. But then you can see also in a certain breakdown what proportion of my responses were good enough vis-a-vis environmental, social, management, quality, and ethics. So this is again following the ITC sustainability map structure, and you can check side by side where you are. This assessment is, of course, not the end of the journey, because most of the companies, they would like to get this first assessment before they go into either a certification process. We mentioned the UEBT as well in a certain time, or linkages to other standards in the ITC sustainability map. I mean, we have Fair Trade, Rainforest Alliance, organic production. So there are connections that you can see in the standards map portion of sustainability map to relate to those different programs for certifications that the companies might be interested. But this is up to the companies to decide to which extent they need a certification. At the very least, what we are very happy to offer is this diagnostic tool where the companies can learn where they are, what are areas of improvement, and then for the next steps, well, the BioTrade info sharing and networking page is there. Once you have an account, you can also be publicly visible. So you remember the world map that I was showing in the very beginning. So if you are interested in having it into the website, you can easily do this on your own as well. So thank you so much, David. I will turn back the floor to you. I know we have some time constraints. I hope this was clear. My presentation that includes also screenshots of the tool will be shared with everyone who is interested. And in the meantime, obviously ask any question you want in the chat box, and my colleague Anna and myself will be very happy to answer those questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mathieu. This was already presented also in a different webinar, but I think some training may be useful so people can interact directly with the different categories and uses of the platform. Also, that there are different categories for terrestrial food products. I think terrestrial cosmetic and terrestrial marine food. There are different categories depending on your value chain. Now, please, I would encourage, we're going to the Q&A, but I have not seen yet any question. I can see that the link for testing the self-assessment tool was sent to everybody. So please feel free to use it. It will tell you how close you are with this and other standards. So it's a very useful tool. If there are questions, please type them into the chat so we can see. We have a first question. We can all see it on the chat. Let me see if I can make it bigger so I can read it. I have a question from Marlon Martinez. It says a question related to the principles in general and more specific to the assessment tool. Is it possible to have more information on how RELATES integrates other existing sustainability tools as well as organic fair trade certification? Mathieu, that goes to you. To what extent this tool integrate is linked to other tools and certifications such as organic fair trade? Please.
Yes, thank you so much, David, and thank you, Marlon, for the question. So indeed, the BioTrade Principles and Criteria were mapped in the ITC Sustainability Map to build the self-assessment tool, but together with other standards, the Sustainability Map offers as well comparability between the BioTrade Principles and Criteria and those other sustainability tools that you have mentioned, like the fair trade, organic production, and etc. So I recommend that you go to the website, to the sustainabilitymap.org/BioTrade website, and when you enter the self-assessment tool, you will be also connected to the overall sustainability map database. And this is a very interesting resource where you can select a number of tools such as fair trade or organic production, organic US, organic EU, organic Japan, and then you can make the comparison so that you see which portions of those organic or fair trade standards are also covered and addressed by the BioTrade Principles and Criteria. Which are the parts that go beyond and which are the parts that go below. And so this is where you can see easily, let's say you are fair trade certified, maybe some of the parts of the BioTrade Principles and Criteria would be automatically covered. And then also vice versa, once you have done your self-assessment on BioTrade, you know that there are already a number of criteria from fair trade or organic production that you would also be looking for compliance. And this is something that it is not replacing, again, a certification process, but it is complementing. And so this is the whole point of the sustainability map, that you can do both. You can do the self-assessment, but you can also compare to those other tools. So Everything is on Sustainability Map. I am sure that we will have a chance to create webinars and training sessions online, and maybe also one day in person when we are over COVID. But already online, we are more than happy to create a session, a webinar training, to show all the functionalities of the tool and the Sustainability Map. David, you're still on mute. Sorry.
Thank you. Just coming back and forward. Thank you. Your points are very welcome and are very important to show that the importance of the BioTrade principles is that it is kind of an umbrella set of principles and guidance, and there be many more that are more specific that could be also linked to the self-assessment tool. I have other questions, perhaps for Lorena and Maria Julia. How soon do we see the implementation of the 2020 BioTrade principles and how they can be integrated into national policy? Do these principles and criteria belong to a highly motivated club? I think we're more than that, but it's good that you asked the question. How do we embark consumers in this process? Lorena, Maria Julia, for you?
Yeah, maybe let me start. Hold on, let me turn on the light here because it's getting dark.
To bring post-tenebras looks.
Yeah.
Geneva.
So thank you very much. This is an excellent question. I think an important point was made in the introductions about biodiversity and the increasing importance of this concept. And I think the person who asked these questions is right. It used to be that at the beginning, talking about biodiversity, talking about BioTrade was still really a niche issue. I think that has significantly changed over the past years, and it's not just an opinion, but also something we've been able to see through an annual survey that UEBT does called the UEBT Biodiversity Barometer, which has over the years interviewed over 15,000 consumers around the world and seen the awareness of biodiversity increase significantly over the years. But also with this awareness, we're seeing increasing demands from consumers to companies for more information and independent validation of where the ingredients come from and the way in which these ingredients are sourced, both in terms of social and ecological issues. And just to another point is that we also have tracked the way that companies are reporting on biodiversity issues. And we have also seen the number of companies talking about biodiversity in their corporate communications increase significantly over the years, particularly in the cosmetic sector. So I think this is right. We still always have a ways to go, but I think work is ongoing and we're definitely making progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Julia. Lorena, on policy?
Yes, yeah, thanks, David. So to complement Maria Julia, yes, on the policy side, BioTrade is already mainstream, for example, into the decisions of the Convention on Biological Diversity, but also from CITES. It's not a closed group, it's really like an open group. And that's why even the inclusion of the BioTrade Principles and Criteria into ITC's self-assessment tool, it also helps to raise awareness and understanding of what BioTrade is, how it's compatible with the activities that are being implemented, and also it provides you with a transparent way to assess the activities that you're going, see the partners that are implementing, and of course we welcome to expand the BioTrade partnerships broader. On the policies, well, it's not only on the multilateral environmental agreements that BioTrade is already featured since early, I think, 2008, 2009, but also at the national level. We see, for example, that BioTrade is, as presented by Peru today, it's really mainstream into the policy environment of the country. You have even a national BioTrade strategy that is being fostered by several ministries of it's been fostered under the National Committee for the Promotion of BioTrade, the platform they have, where involves Ministries of Trade, Agriculture, and abroad stakeholders. But then you also see that, for example, the inclusion of BioTrade in the bioeconomy legislation, for example, in Ecuador. So we are there. It's true. We are mainstreaming. We're working towards that. And that is also the work that we have, for example, under the post-2020 process, where we are feeding with the experiences of partners around the globe, but also proposing even indicators under the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and the mainstreaming strategy as well. So just that's in a nutshell. But no, we have more time.
Thank you, Lorena. We have another question from Guillaume Delaunay. He asked, does COVID-19 reshuffle the cards regarding the urgent timeline about new BioTrade principles and criteria and sustainability initiatives to change of speakers? Perhaps, well, do we have an urgency in doing this now? We may need genetic resources to address COVID-19, these pathogens and others, please.
Well, you really put me now on the spot.
That's the idea. That's the idea. Let's wake up everybody.
Okay, I mean, what I can say is now that we see two divergent developments, which is quite interesting. So on the one hand, we see that some biotrade value chains or even ABS value chains are quite negatively affected by COVID-19. So in terms of harvesting, in terms of people getting to the field and so on. But on the other hand, we also see in a couple of countries, in particular when it comes to essential oils, when it comes to sanitizers, which are based on biodiversity-based products, that there's a huge increase in demand and production. So that's quite interesting that you do see both sides of the coin. Then, of course, and I don't know, David, whether one could consider a pathogen a subject of biotrade. Is of course that the question of developing vaccines based on pathogens is of course now being dealt with at the level of the CBD. And the big elephant in the room is whether or not the CBD will deal in terms of benefit sharing with the digital sequence information. But here definitely on this topic, DSI in or out, COVID-19 will play the role of a game changer.
Thank you very much. Well, there are some regulations that were not WHO, but for certain virus sharing, especially on H1N1, but not on COVID yet. I don't have more questions receiving. 1 second. Let me see if I see more. 1 second. I'm checking the chat. I'm sorry. Clarification was by Matthew. I don't have more questions. I don't know if any of the speakers would like to take the opportunity to make a clarification or expand. It seems that we don't have many more questions. Perhaps I see Yvonne is writing to us. I don't know if she left. Perhaps she wants to mention something on the importance of wildlife and prevention of pandemics, if she's still there. If not, Juan Carlos.
Juan Carlos is still there.
Juan Carlos perhaps wants to say something as we get more questions.
Hi, David. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please. Some people have raised the point of COVID-19 and the importance of protecting nature. From the BioTrade angle, do you have anything to say on the importance of protecting wildlife and pandemics?
Well, that's a very interesting question during these times. And you know that biodiversity and human health are closely related on a positive way and on a negative way as well. So as a positive way, biodiversity is a source of health, and even the vaccines that they are discovering now, they are tested in animals. So all the immunology comes from biodiversity, from wildlife. These molecules are found in nature, and that's an important part of the trade on biomedical products. And biodiversity also is the reservoir of all these pathogens. So we have to be careful on when we trade on the conditions of that trade, mainly when we transport animals, to make sure that we don't transmit, we don't contribute to this zoonotic risk. You know, zoonotic diseases are those that jump from animals to humans, and the COVID-19 is one of these. And the risk is increasing with the destruction of biodiversity. So this is very relevant for us. I think that there are many business opportunities. I think that biotrade is one of the responses to the threat, this main driver, which is land conversion. One of the incentives to maintain the ecosystems is to be able to use the biodiversity that exists in these ecosystems in a sustainable way. So what you are doing now, I think, is part of the response to the pandemic. And we need to, basically, the key concept for us is managing the risk. And now we need to add to all these criteria the sanitary risk. So we were talking about sustainability, legality, social aspects. Now we need to include the sanitary risk, the health component of the trade. Thank you, David. Over to you.
Absolutely, Juan Carlos. Very, very wise response as always. I have a comment by Suel, but I think it's linked to a question. It leads us to a question. It has been difficult for many small and medium enterprises to implement all the principles and criteria in business. They can be complex, all-encompassing. We're trying to make them simple to the 2020 version. But he says what one could say are the lower-hanging fruits in BioTrade, how we should restart the process of implementing the 2020 BioTrade principles. What should be the priorities in terms of whether value chains, whether of businesses or consumers. Lorena may complement, and I will also give the word to Rudy, who applies this in practice. Lorena and Rudy, the floor is yours on this swell point.
Yeah, no, Rudy, go ahead if he wants to answer. Yeah, you're ready.
Rudy, we need you back.
Ladies first. Please go on, Lorena.
Okay. Yeah, I think it depends on the low-hanging fruit. It depends on where do you stand in the value chain and where is your business being developed. Particularly for developing countries, SMEs, I think the tool and the self-assessment tool will tell you what will be the low-hanging fruit on a case-by-case basis. I would really like go into that line. Of course, how do we mainstream BioTrade better and we bring the community forward will be to mainstream and to work further ahead with the consumer side to raise awareness about the importance of biodiversity and of BioTrade. And of other also labels that are working with the partners, so that it will be a joint effort of combining all the actors and the activities that are moving forward. I hope it helps.
Rudy.
Yes, I fully agree. I think it depends really on the location where you work and, of course, the legal framework there. And starting with the low-hanging fruits, I think is definitely an advantage. Before really starting working on ingredients which require the full set of access and benefit sharing tools, I think we should really start with the easy ones and help to build then gradually those procedures that are required to get certification, etc. So yeah, in that sense, I fully agree with this statement.
Thank you very much, Rudy. I think we are 10 minutes above time, so I think we need to start closing. So thank you for all the participants. Thank you to all the partners. Thank you to all the speakers. It has been a great session today. I'm going to give the floor to Lorena in case she wants to complement, and perhaps goes to Teresa for closing.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please turn on your cameras and smile for the next few minutes while we are closing so that we can take group pictures. Dear partners, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the post-2020 BioTrade Principles and Criteria are officially launched. You can now access them directly in the BioTrade website. We are thrilled to have heard from you, the guest speakers and participants, how the BioTrade principles and criteria are relevant from local, national governments and from large to small companies. The BioTrade 2020 BioTrade principles and criteria can indeed be applied in different economic, social circumstances, and they are relevant to practitioners as well as for policy making. They are developed building on experiences gained by partners and practitioners since its first principles and criteria were launched in 2007. And I would like to reiterate our thanks to all our partners. Many of you are here today, and I can see you in the camera. So thank you for being here with us from Latin America, from Asia, from Africa, from Europe, and the practitioners that make all the concepts and the tools that we develop applied in the ground. So thank you very much for being contributed over the years in applying BioTrade and the revision process. Thanks also to your strong engagement. The BioTrade principles and criteria updated are a real-world example for successful mainstreaming of BioTrade, which the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will aim for. This launch is the kickoff of a campaign to promote these updated principles. We plan to have more activities like regional or sector-specific workshops and trainings. So stay tuned for information that we will share on our social media channels and email, but also on the ITC's knowledge sharing platform. We are also launching on the same platform. You will find the self-assessment tool, and we really encourage all of you to explore it and also learn about the partners and the tools that are being developed. So let's continue this dialogue. All presentations of the post-2020 BioTrade principles and criteria, the recording of this webinar, and the background materials will be publicly available. If you see on the screen right now, you will see the links. You will see the links of the self-assessment tool, but also of the webinar. And we will be sending you shortly an evaluation form with all the information that you have seen here. Last but not least, I would like to thank very much all the speakers, partners, and of course SECO for your vision, inspiration, and above all, commitment to implement the 2020 BioTrade principles and criteria. Thank you all for the interest and participation, and we are encouraging you to use this new updated version, make them known, and work with BioTrade partners and practitioners in being part of the transformation to a sustainable planet. Thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you again.
And we are very motivated, so thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much for staying with us.